words in their very best order.
And
I began to study poetry inside myself, and the power of it, the power poetry had. And so the beat poets thought the poetry would be returned through jazz. Jack Kerouac wrote on the road with a continuous scroll of paper on an old typewriter on benzodrine, and he was tapping out the keys to bebop rhythms of Charlie Parker. And the other boys, the other poets, were reading poetry to jazz. They thought it would come back through jazz. They weren't all wrong, but where it would marry with popular song would be from the folk world, because folk songs already had meaningful lyrics. And, well, it's history now, but the folk sound and the pop sound married and created what we now call the 60s music.
Before we transition to TM, which I want to talk about in a second, I just want to mention that, to me, what's so powerful about poetry, and I read a lot, and I'm so glad, Donovan, that you're talking about the importance of reading, because so few people are reading these days, and that's where you go. You can go on your own hero's journey by simply reading. You don't have to travel the world.
Oh, yeah.
Books can take you places and help expand your horizon. And poetry is so magical, I think, because it's the distillation. Writing a book is hard, but writing poetry, oh my gosh, that's the essence. So it's a beautiful art. But, TM has been so important to you and so transformative. And we did hear that you went with a illustrious gang to go learn TM. But I would like to know sort of how did that touch you? When you first learned it? What was it like?
Well, as I say, from Jack's book, Kerouac's book, the Zen and Buddhism, leading on to the Upanishads and the Diamond Sutra, when I started absorbing, I realized that behind the poets and behind the revolution was this extraordinary, antique, ancient wisdom, where it spoke that inside everybody was this extraordinary pure land of the Buddhists, the Avalon of the North, the Norsemen, the Tirnanog of the Celts. There was this magical spiritual land that you could only enter at certain times or with magical formulas. And I knew that the key was meditation. How do you actually go in? Well, it's called meditation. You get a mantra, but has anybody got one? And George Harrison and I would talk, we've got the books, we know we need to get the mantra and we need the technique, but there was very few yogis in the West. We knew some yogis had come over the 20th century, but there was none now. So it was 1966, George and I talking about this, and John Lennon's reading the Tibetan Book of the Dead, and George is reading the autobiography of a yogi. I'm doing the Buddhist texts, and we're looking, and then in 67 it came about that George was studying in India with Ravi Shankar, trying to learn sitar, which is the most difficult thing for a Westerner to do, but George is going to adapt that and make an extraordinary sound on his guitar. But while he's practicing, Patty Boyd is hanging out with the Shankar women. And they're all dressed in saris, and they take her to an evening. And that evening is Maharishi Mahesh Yogi presenting the spiritual regeneration movement. Now, this is really extraordinary, because she comes back, and then she sees that Maharishi is coming to England, introduces the Beatles to Maharishi. They get initiated. I notice it, talk to George, and he said, he's arrived, he's here, the yogi's here that we were talking about. And so I met Maharishi and got initiated. And so, we're looking for it, Christine, wondering when it was coming, and Maharishi beginning his mission in 58 and bringing it into the world, and there we were, finally face to face. It's extraordinary. And then from then on, when I got my mantra, it was clear. I understood now what the books had been speaking of.
Wow. Now, we're going to have to speed up through some of these questions because there's so much important stuff I want to talk about. Oh, my gosh.
Well, I'll be short now. I'll give you sound bites.
Yeah, we're going to transition to sound bites. Hey, we all know that following our passion, it's not always easy. So will you share just some of the biggest challenges you faced in your career, and how'd you overcome those?
All right. Well, at first, the sensitive youth, that's a very basic story, boy and girl. You're sensitive, you read books, you're going to be bullied in school. That's the first one. second one, oh, well, it was even before that, before school. I had polio as a kid, so I got used to being different. And that was tough, you know. The boy with a limp. And kids would make fun of that. That was hard to get over. And then when I actually arrived, I was compared to Bob Dylan. Not only compared, but some people called me a copyist. Only those who knew that Bobby's hat and his harmonica and my hat and my harmonica was a direct honor and tribute to Woody Guthrie, the great American folk singer, who also wore a hat and a harmonica. That was a hard one at first, but my mother, my father was the poet, the amateur poet. My mother was a Glasgow woman called Winifred. My father was called Donald. My mother was a Glasgow woman who did not take any bull from anyone. No matter who you were, if you were a king or a pauper, if you were a pop star or a president, she would tell you what she thought. And that was a great power. And she brought me up to feel that. So whenever a challenge came, I rode above it. And of course, challenges continued beyond then. I guess one of the challenges was dealing with business. You know, we all, Beatles and me and everybody in my generation, we didn't even look at the money that was being attracted to this celebrity success that we were experiencing. It was just, we didn't realize how many millions of dollars were pouring in, and one day we'd have to face it and take responsibility. And there were lawsuits and, oh God. And there were a small mini nervous breakdown at the end of the 60s. I think that's pretty much all the challenges that I've been through. But the heaviest one in the heart was losing Linda for the first time, only to gain her later again. But losing Linda in 65 was a great challenge. But the record company loved it because I started producing hit records from my songs.
Now, what do you think were maybe one or two things that you do to overcome